Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Content Marketing Hitmakers, Audience-Centric Formats You Need to Add to Your Catalog. My name is Claudia Tarico. I'm the Features Editor at Demand Gen Report and I'll be your moderator for this presentation. Today by Content for Demand's Dana Harder, Alicia Esposito, and Steve Voice, who will be sharing some great audience-centric content examples with us today. They're going to give us a little bit of background on the roles at Content for Demand and then dive right into their presentation. So I'll hand things over to you, Dana. Let's get things started.
Thank you so much, Claudia. So thanks so much for everyone tuning in today. My name is Dana Harder, and I'm the Vice President of Strategy here at Content for Demand. So I get to spend a lot of my time helping clients put together demand gen programs and content strategies that help drive engagement. And I'm really excited to be looking at some of those formats we're seeing as not only best practices, but things that are forward thinking and that really resonate with our buyers of today. I have a background in channel marketing and content development and marketing strategy. Been in the business for a long time. And since this has a music theme today, I'm supposed to share a fun fact about something that's related to music. So 2 years ago, I won a singing competition at the Serious Decision Summit in Nashville. That does not mean I am a good singer. I think I was just lucky at the moment. So with that, I'm going to pass on to Alicia.
Thanks so much, Dana. Hi, everyone. I'm Alicia Esposito, and I'm a content strategist with Content for Demand. I've been with the organization for about 7 years now, and my role is really about distilling buyer insights and buyer preferences and transforming them into powerful stories. And of course, over the past few years, that's evolved quite a bit to include new formats and new storytelling vehicles. So it's been really exciting to collaborate with not only Dana, but design to create these fantastic experiences for all types of audiences. And of course, my foundation or my core background is in publishing and content writing and content marketing. But my fun fact is prior to joining Content for Demand, I actually worked in the marketing department for a local music publication. So I spent a lot of time reviewing shows, working with advertisers, and even helping out at some music festivals. So I definitely have a strong love and passion for music outside of my professional life. And now without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Steve.
I'll just start by saying Alicia's fun fact is better than mine. But hi, everyone. This is Steve Voice. I'm the Director of Marketing and Demand Generation for Content for Demand. Actually, prior to joining the agency, I was a client for 3 years, so a little bit of a success story there. But excited to talk to you guys today. My background is in content marketing and corporate communication, and this is a question we ask of a lot of our new employees here at the agency, what their first concert was, and my first one was a U2 concert. So with that, we can just jump right in. So, the way we're going to structure today's call, as we go through we're going to talk about a couple different formats and best practices that we'll showcase and give you some really good best practices and details on. All of this work we've done with our fantastic clients, and we'll discuss it all in a roundtable format. And then, of course, we're going to leave some time for the Q&A at the end. But the focus of the webinar is really to just profile the content that we think rocks. And one thing that we know from an agency perspective and that we can assert with confidence is that the content that performs the best is a couple different things. The first of which it's specific to the buyer. We talk a lot about the importance of pulling those buyer factoids and pain points into the content we're creating because we feel like that's what leads to the best success. The other thing that we're talking about is how content consumption and content formats are constantly evolving. And it's not unlike the trends that we've seen in the music industry with the entrance of newer formats like MP3s and then to streaming. We're also seeing interesting things happening like the resurgence of more retro formats like records and seeing those come back into fashion a bit. Hence the theme of our webinar, which is you're going to see a lot of music-centric references. So, I mentioned buyers, so let's talk a little bit more about them before we get into the samples. Again, at Content for Demand, we pride ourselves on being able to work with our clients to create audience-centric content. And this slide showcases just a few of the things that we obsess over when we create content and campaigns with our clients. It keeps in mind, the buyer's role in the organization, who else they might be making a decision with. what their buyer's journey looks like and where in that buyer's journey they are. Probably most important on this list are their pain points and questions. What do they need at each stage in the buyer's journey? We know that's unique at each stage, and those messages and insights that we pull into content has to be specific and relevant in order for it to convert and for your buyers to move forward. This is some data from the Demand Gen Reports Content Preferences Study. It's a fantastic resource. If you haven't checked it out, it's available on their site. Highly recommend it. It's got lots of good nuggets. But I really like this slide because it tells us as marketers, what our buyers are looking for from us. So just a few things to call out. I mean, this shouldn't be a shocker to anyone, but buyers are looking for us more and more to curb the sales message. We can't make our content product-centric. It has to be about them. And some of the things that they're asking for more specifically are that they want us to start understanding their pain points and better understand their needs and share more relevant pieces and information that addresses those pain points, including things like more data and research and benchmarking where they might be in their role as a marketer or as a decision maker. And then also, obviously, we're seeing lots of calls for increase for more third-party influencer perspectives, more that outside perspective that adds that authenticity to our content. And just one last slide here from the research study. These are some of the content formats that buyers say they're using as they research, buying decisions or make purchase decisions. And a lot of these should seem very familiar to you. Sometimes we're a little surprised that we continue to see things like white papers and ebooks on there, as they can sometimes be seen as more traditional. But this is, making a good case for that. There's really still a place for these formats. One of the things we're going to talk about through the discussion here is that, these different formats, there's different ways that you can kind of work with them in the traditional sense, but then also level them up, make them more engaging using interactivity or even just thinking and going about them in different ways to make them more palatable for your audience. And just the two things that we're going to work on, or that we work with our clients to understand are, that kind of relate to what you're seeing here on the screen are, these are what, general B2B buyers are saying are their content preferences. But again, we try to drill home with each of our clients, what are their specific buyers and buyer group preferences? Because those are going to be specific for just, the director of IT versus director of marketing, whatever your audience might be. But then we also work with our clients to understand, what do their content preferences look like when you break them across the buyer's journey? Early, middle, and late, this could look a lot different. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm getting ready to stop talking, and I'm going to lean on Dana and Alicia to walk us through some more, using their insights. They work really closely with all of our clients day in and day out. So we're going to walk through some client samples and share some best practices by showcasing their fantastic work. So we'll just kind of walk through things live and have a really good discussion. So hang in one second while I share my screen. All right, Dana, Alicia, let me know when you guys can see our first section, which is going to focus on short form content.
Looks like we're good.
I can see it.
Great. So there's been a lot of buzz about short form content in the industry. We know B2B buyers are asking for this. A few stats, again, from the content preferences study that I referenced. We know that 92% of buyers prefer shorter content formats, things like infographics that are quicker and easier to read. Additionally, we know 87% prefer the more interactive and visual formats. And then lastly, in the report, I noticed that 86% want content that renders natively on mobile devices. So Dana, I don't know, can you tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in the space and how you guys solve for that?
Yeah, I definitely think, it's shorter, more visual content is definitely the new forward path, I think, when it comes to content. Ways to show people that we can, what's the time commitment if I go into that asset with things like the sample you pulled up, the titles, 5 signs that latency is killing your business. I know that when I go right to this piece, I only have to comb through 5 of these key points. As simple as it may sound, it's about, delivering on a promise. So I think overall it's about, ways to allow our audience know know that I can get something out of the asset and it's going to be quick for me to go through. So one of the ways that we're seeing this is with a format called a listicle. Think of it as the BuzzFeed in the B2B world. So it's really about lists or ways to condense the information that I'm going to show you in a highly visual way with less copy. The listicle that we're looking at on screen is actually for one of our clients, Micron, and the idea, this is actually what we would call an interactive listicle. So this is a web-based asset. It feels like I'm on a website page, which is also, you know, the kind of viewing experience that we're seeing people navigate towards. It's something I'm used to. I know what it looks like. It also translates easy to whatever device I'm on. So whether it be a phone or a tablet, this piece is going to be completely mobile friendly and allow me still to consume that information versus if I'm trying to open a PDF on my phone and it's too big and I can't see it and I can't zoom in, all that good stuff. The other great things about listicles in this kind of format is you can see, I mean, the copy is really short, right? A couple paragraphs at the most. It's really visual. I can skim this and read those titles, the one that's up 3, even on an all-flash infrastructure, leaves plenty of room for improvement, and know right away if I even want to read that next paragraph. So it allows me to skim it and get through it quickly and pick out the nuggets that are actually important to me. So listicles can be done this way interactive and also in a static fashion. And Steve, I saw you were just going to a click to tweet. You know, one of the benefits of interactive content in general is opportunity for, you know, CTAs that I can track now, the click to tweet button. So I can share a tweet or an item from that piece and send it out. And what's great about it is the tweet is composed, it goes out, and there's a bit.ly link there that's going to lead people back to this asset. So I've got my readers actually sharing my content for me and driving more conversion back. I think, you know, the other point, Steve, you can go to the other listicle too. I think the other thing that, you know, we can do with these is they can get really creative, right? So this example that we're going to show you here is actually for one of our publications on our media side of the business. And as you look through it, it's much more like an infographic feeling, right? So it feels like an infographic, it goes down, but it's really that listicle. It gave us the top five ways to complete X, or 6 ways, whatever the promise was there. But it's really short. If you look, there's maybe 15 words under each action item. So the point, again, that I can scroll through this really quickly and then get to what I'm looking for. And there's a really strong CTA at the end. So listicles, definitely an interesting format. It's relatively new, and we're seeing a lot of push for these in top of the funnel and mid funnel. But I have to tell you, I see this also replacing the checklist from an interactive version, which we're going to talk about in a minute, in terms of late stage, where we see if the information is a little meatier and really gets to the heart of the problem, this could kind of fill that void as a checklist on an interactive world. So Steve, why don't we go over to that checklist and we can talk a little bit about that. So checklists are an interesting asset. I think if I talk to my clients throughout the day on this, they will tell me continually that checklists are one of their most highest performing assets. The reason being is, again, I know that when I go into a checklist, I'm going to get those top 5, 10, 6, whatever the number is, things or pitfalls to avoid, whatever it may be, in the content asset. Now, what I will tell you with a checklist is we tend to see these being used more mid to late stage funnel. These are really good for an ROI justification, a purchase justification. How do I sell this up to my boss? Whatever that checklist may be, how do I know if the solution's right for me? And I think that what we know is that these checklists, when they are meaty and they really give us the core of what I need to make a purchase decision, they're really well, or they're really great for conversion kind of later in the stage. So,
actually, Dan, it's interesting. I heard that just recently. That actually, if you're creating a list, the most powerful numbers to include on there are 10 and 5.
That's interesting.
Interesting tidbit.
If anyone has any idea why, they can chat that into us in the webinar. I'd love to know what that theory is behind numbers. But I could see it. It's interesting. 10 seems kind of long, but I wonder if I know there's a whole bunch of research around numbers. So and then I think what's interesting about this one at the bottom, it's short to the point, similar to the listicle, a little more copy because it's meant to give us an answer. Right? When we say communicate changes quickly and clearly, what does that mean? When we say configure this space, what does that mean? This is for a client of ours, AgileQuest, who helps, I believe, their scheduling software for conference rooms within an organization. So this is really about, right, the impact at the end of the day when we've all, in a large organization, if I'm there and I've got the software, it's really going to help us streamline the situation. And anybody who's visited a large company, you know, when you get in there, it's difficult to find conference rooms. But the point of this is that I can read this and understand the value of what do I need to accomplish as it relates to the topic. So again, you know, these first assets here, listicles, checklists, very similar in nature, but meant to be short, copy, and visual, and they can be either interactive and static. But the biggest takeaway, I think, from these assets is the idea that my CTA is strong, I can scan them quickly, and I can get important pieces of information that I actually find valuable to, you know, the reason that I opened it up. So with that, I'm going to pass on to Alicia to talk about a few other short format content assets.
Thanks so much, Dana. Again, I think you hit on a lot of really good points around how short to the point, you know, they're really critical. I mean, your buyers only have so much time to dedicate to reading assets in a day. So I think these powerful short form and visual formats really help capture that attention. And with that, I feel like we'd be remiss if we did not talk about infographics in this category. And, you know, I think they're a staple for all B2B brands. You know, it's something that is a part of the overall marketing mix, I think, for any company. But what I've kind of noticed is that we've experienced a bit of an evolution as far as, you know, what we can do with infographics and what kind of stories we can tell with infographics. I know when we first started seeing them in the industry, they were essentially data dumps, you know, just one asset with a bunch of data points integrated into one experience. Sometimes they told a story, sometimes they just focused on a high-level topic. But what we're seeing now, like this example here from Cox Media, is that we're really transforming them into, you know, comprehensive stories about a particular industry or an audience. And, you know, Cox Media provides advertising solutions from TV all the way to mobile advertising, and they really wanted to paint a picture around how these different channels impact customer engagement and, of course, you know, the businesses. So we actually helped them create a few different tailored infographics, each infographic focusing on a particular industry. And as you can see, it's not just a slew of different stats. It's, you know, insights on target consumers, their browsing and buying behaviors, and there's even some best practices at the end. You know, after we kind of set the stage, there's some tactical tips and takeaways. So, you know, what we're able to do is create a template. And I know a lot of companies talk about economy of scale. We only have so much time and resources to dedicate to creating content. So taking this kind of approach and having a infographic template that you can easily customize and tailor to different industries you speak to is really compelling, because across the board, it still tells a very powerful story. And then, you know, beyond static, I think, oh, sorry, Steve?
No, I was going to say, I love that idea of the reversioning. Keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, people kind of lose sight. They think there has to be a completely new experience every time they create an infographic, but with those templates, a lot of the time and the guesswork gets out of it. But, you know, with that, we've also seen a shift to interactive infographics. And I know interactive is kind of the hot new thing. We're actually going to be showing a few different types of interactive formats through this discussion. But, you know, what I find most intriguing about interactive infographics is all the different ways that we can, you know, tell the story. So this example from Broadridge is a pretty traditional vertical scrolling experience. You know, it's very clean, very modern. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of big glitzy storytelling here, but what I like and find extremely valuable is that all of the different interactive elements serve a purpose. And I think based on all of the work that we've done in the interactive realm, the key takeaway for me is have fun, make it interactive, but make sure it serves a purpose, especially if you're targeting, very buttoned up buyers, ones that are focused on utility over entertainment. And, what I like best is that, it always ties to the next step in the buyer journey. Infographics are always very powerful top funnel content formats. And, I think this example does the format justice very well. And then I think our next example is a little bit more out of the box, Steve, if we can bring that up. This is a piece we worked on with Cisco, and essentially they wanted to tell the story from the buyer's point of view around the common pain points and challenges that arise with, having teams in different places, and of course having different types of collaboration tools that don't necessarily work together. And as you can see, this is not a traditional infographic. There are actually no data points within it. It instead focuses on a linear story about one central character, and each panel tells about a different point in her day, a different point where she faces a challenge. And, there's room for growth or improvement in how she collaborates with her team. And what I find great is, as you can see on the screen here, is that there are little pop-ups and interactive widgets within the experience that unlock more content. So it's almost in a way like you're kind of traveling through a comic book or a storyboard. And, the buyer is in control, the audience is in control as far as, what type of content they can unlock or where they can find more information. And Steve, if you click this little button here, the smartphone, it unlocks more information and tells a little bit more detail into the story. So again, as you can tell from, these very diverse examples, there are really no boundaries anymore as far as, how to tell a powerful infographic story. But I do think the best ones, the ones that stand out, are the ones that have that powerful story, that buyer-focused story as the foundation. And Steve, I think that's all I have. If you have any other feedback, or we can move on to the next format.
No, I love this asset. This is a particularly compelling one. Would you say that there's, a particularly up increase in terms of the time investment it takes to create these interactive assets, or is it almost the same as what you might experience when building a static infographic?
Well, I think the timelines are a little bit longer, largely because we're creating some custom animations. If there needs to be custom development work done when we get into the production stage. But I would argue, creating an experience like this doesn't take much longer time, from a content creation standpoint, especially if, you're creating the content for the experience that you'd like to create. So when we were doing this particular project, we developed the content with the layers and, with the interactive touches in mind. So when we got to the design phase, that actually helped, trim some of the initial work that I think design would have to do. They didn't have to guess what the experience would look like. We were all pretty much aligned from the get-go.
Love it. Great. So the next section, we talked about ebooks. That was on, you guys all saw that on one of the most popular formats on the data points I showed earlier from the content preferences story. But I think we can all also admit that, there's a little bit of, when we see ebook written on, sort of a download call to action, we inherently think, oh, okay, another ebook. I think there can be a perception out there that buyers can get a little bit numb to just simply the name of the format and how they're done. And I think, again, this draws a similar parallel. I think we as the agency have been seeing a similar parallel to almost what's been happening with records, right? They came up a little bit back in fashion. Obviously, they've been remastered and done a little bit better, so that the sound quality is even better. So really, it comes down to what's the packaging and presentation of those ebooks that we're seeing really resonate with different buyers. So, Alicia, I think you have a good example to walk us through.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. And what I love about Gbooks, and we got this from our creative director, John Genzo, is that Gbooks are essentially if an ebook and an infographic had a baby. And I think, when we talk to clients about this format, they're like, what even is that? So that's really essentially what a Gbook is in a nutshell. It's about, letting a story be present and consistent throughout an asset rather than, trying to boil the ocean, so to speak. And what I really like about this example from Bottom Line Technologies is that they're kind of using cross-sell as a very precise act, almost like walking on a tightrope, right? So they took a metaphor and really went to town with it. So I would say Gbooks are an optimal format to do that. Think of ways that you can, present your topic or a trend in a more relatable and human fashion. And, see how your creative team can carry it out throughout the entire piece. And then I would say overall that, Gbooks are, of course, shorter. Again, the common theme we're going to hear a lot about throughout this webinar. Shorter, more to the point, and more actionable, 4 best practices. Like Dana said, very to the point, people know what the value exchange is from the beginning, what they're going to be getting out of it. And, of course, incorporate data when you can. We have had examples of Gbooks where the data was actually the star of the piece. Each page spotlighted a different data point or research takeaway, and there was just a little bit of context or commentary on it. But similar to infographics, I don't think there are necessarily any rules as far as what type of approach works best for Gbooks. Just that, keep your word count in check, and try to find ways to tell your story in a more compelling and visual way. And of course, another standard best practice is to tie it to a next step or call to action that's valuable to your buyer and takes them to the next step in their journey. So as you can see in this example, I love this example because this whole asset is about how to do cross-selling well. And the next step is, hey, let's see how you stack up. It leads them to a free assessment where the buyer can literally see, how they score or where they place versus, everyone as far as their cross-selling tactics. So it's connected to the core story or narrative of the piece, but it takes them a little bit further down that researching and consideration journey so they can see whether they are good where they are or whether they need improvement. And, what I also like about Gbooks is that, this is a static example, but they can also be interactive. So, with that leads us to another really compelling interactive format that turns the whole ebook model on its head, and that's iPapers. So I'm going to pass it off to Dana because she's going to dive into some really cool examples.
Thank you, Alicia. Yeah, so iPapers are interesting, right? I think, the title of this section is Reimagining the ebook. And, every year we see the stats on the content preferences study that white papers is the #1 most downloaded thing. And I always say to people, wait a second, this isn't the white paper that we all looked at, 3 years ago that were 25 pages long and had hardly any graphics. Those do exist to some extent, maybe for engineers or some really technical audiences or on the tech side. But the reality is the white paper of today is not much different than the ebook. And in a lot of ways, it still maybe has a little more copy, but it still tends to be more visual in nature, and it's definitely come a long way. And we get asked all the time, is the white paper gone away? Is there still a place for it? And our answer is it has not gone away. There's absolutely a place for it. Matter of fact, we've seen it take a little bit of a facelift in the last 12 to 18 months. So one of the ways that has happened is with this asset called an iPaper. So this, could also be an ebook, an interactive ebook type format as well. But what it is a web-based content asset that is longer in content or longer in editorial than some of the other assets we've shown you, where that Gbook Alicia just went through was still pretty short, and that listicle and the checklist, all very short content. But this tends to have a little more content. It's a deeper dive. It's a bigger rock asset, provides us a little more detail into the areas that we need to know. This one that we're looking here is for a company called Ciox, who's a client of ours. And this was part of a nurture that they did, and it was more of an anchor piece, right? It's meant to be a little bit longer, you know, maybe something we gate for versus something we're giving away for free. And as you can see, it's got quite a bit more content than what we've seen. Still not what we might see in a PDF format, but a little more content. It's definitely more visual, lots of icons, and we can embed a lot of those similar interactive experiences that we've been pointing out. This purple box here is what we would call a carousel. So it allows us to, you know, to skip through and see the different items. You know, Steve was just on a one-click social. So like in the listicle, we can embed social links in here. We can embed things like videos, quizzes, all of those different elements. And again, built in HTML5, feels a little bit like a web page. So we're totally mobile friendly when it comes to how your prospects and customers can consume the content. So this one also had a great CTA at the bottom. It took us to a quiz, or an ROI calculator, calculating the cost of their coding services as insourcing the answer. And so what a great way to deliver a quiz or an assessment in an asset. And what we know is when we bury these in PDFs, they don't get quite the engagement, but if I bury other content, or I shouldn't say bury, if I put other content or quizzes or assessments within interactive assets, they're easier to see, find, point out, and people are more likely to engage with them. So this piece is really a great 1-2 punch. You know, I've got this white paper that sets, or iPaper that sets up the story, and it takes me directly to a quiz so I can see how do I stack up, or how do I align with what people are saying in the iPaper. But definitely a format we're seeing a huge transition towards. How can I take my content to be more interactive? How do I take it to be web-based? So definitely a great format. Did we have another iPaper, Steve, or was that it on this one? Great. Yeah,
one more
here. Thanks. Yeah, this one is fantastic. So I wanted to pull this one up. This is for Oracle for their higher education vertical. What I love about this piece is that this was an ebook. So we had an ebook, static. Our client had it done a couple of years ago, and basically he wanted to refresh it and bring new life into it. He felt the content was still very current, but wanted to make it feel more interactive, more engaging, but not feel it exactly like the ebook. And so there was so much valuable information in that ebook that we were able to condense it, make it more visual. This section is so cool. There's different building blocks that you can scroll through as the user and see the different items there, and different copy pops up. There's drop downs within this and different interactive experiences, as well as I can lead to the actual ebook or other pieces of content that we were here. So we're big proponents of repurposing and modularizing content. And Alicia and Steve were talking to this earlier already with the Cox Media infographics and things of that nature. So one way is we're seeing interactive, like iPapers and things being used, is as a reimagination of other static assets. So not as a replacement, but just another way to deliver similar information in a format somebody might consume while still linking to that base asset. So this is a great piece. A lot of really cool elements in here in terms of ways to engage with it. The other thing I'm going to point out here quickly, because we've talked a lot about interactive content as some of these new hit wonders as we come into content. And I think what's important to note about them is we get the question often, why interactive? So, because I can make a PDF really visual and really colorful and short information like the Gbook, and you know, that's all fantastic. I think why we are seeing so much of the progression towards interactive. Obviously, from the user experience, it's much easier than downloading a PDF. But from your perspective as a marketer, the reason for this is the data I have behind the scenes. So everybody knows I download a PDF, it goes into, Never Never Land in a folder somewhere, and I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed that somebody actually went back to their downloads folder and read it. We spend so much time as content marketers creating amazing content, right? Everyone puts so much thought into it. This isn't stuff we're just, ripping through and turning around in a day. This is stuff that you and all your subject matter experts and an organization of people have put a lot of time against and a lot of investment. So how do we know somebody read it? How do we know that our ROI paid off? Interactive gives us that platform. So we know if somebody engaged with the piece. We know that they actually went into it. We know the average time they spent on page, if they zoomed in on a certain area, if they clicked on our embedded links and our social links and all of that. So the interactive platforms and that are allowing us a whole new level of visibility into content consumption we have never had before as content marketers. So, we expect to see the move to interactive content to just keep continually increasing over the next few years. It's not just because our readers and our prospects and clients are demanding it, because it allows you guys as marketers to prove the value in what you're doing. And with PDFs, it's really difficult to do.
This is a really great example. This is pretty much a Mac Daddy. I mean, they've got a content carousel, click to tweet, embedded video. This is sort of the best of all of those. One thing I think I particularly like about this sample is you can really see the shape that it would take if it were written and constructed as a traditional white paper and how long that would get. But having these interactive sections that kind of help contain and reduce the scrolling, almost, so to speak, and it makes the piece feel shorter even if it's not. Awesome
right.
Stuff.
And the different angles you can go, right, Steve? So I can go up and down, but I can go side to side. And it really gives us a platform for, layering information in an easier to consume way.
Absolutely. So speaking of easy to consume, I know one of the formats we wanted to talk about, we're seeing a lot of trends towards what we're calling auditory storytelling. And if you go back, I'm going to reference the content preferences study one more time, and we saw webinars on that list, and obviously there's absolutely a place for those formats in our content mix, hence we're having one today. But, we also know that buyers are hungry for more on-demand formats, and, Dana talked a little bit about that, and I think podcasts and videos are going to be some of those answers to that question and that buyer need. Alicia, do you want to talk about some work you've done in this space?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. And I think, podcasts are an extremely exciting format. I think, the rise of really popular series like Serial and, the rise of, news podcasts from NPR and other sources have really led this shift that, people want to learn, they want to consume content, they want to hear stories, but they also want to do other things as well. So we're seeing a lot of B2B marketers think about how they can embrace this trend, ingrain their stories into consumers' lives in a deeper and a more meaningful way. And I think, podcasts are a fantastic way to do that. And we've also seen our clients and some other B2B brands really take some different and unique approaches to podcasts as well, as far as not only how they create them, but also how they promote them as well. And I think this example from another one from Cox Media, this really does the trick because, we created this really stellar interactive infographic for them focused on, the day in the life of the smartphone user. And this is at a time where they really wanted to further establish their knowledge and expertise in this space. It's a bit elusive, especially for local businesses whom they target. So this was a really powerful educational vehicle highlighting some key trends and data points, but also some to-dos. And what we did was we actually integrated podcasts. So Steve, if you hit that little mic hotspot there, these are sprinkled throughout the infographic experience. And we onboarded two third-party influencers who are experts in mobile marketing and advertising, one of whom is from eMarketer, a really reputable analyst firm. And, they also wanted to integrate their own influencer as well. So you'll see someone from Cox Media also did, her own podcast. And these were interview-style segments. So, we developed really targeted questions around some of the key trends and best practices that our experts were seeing in the marketplace, things that local businesses need to know, and ways that they can embrace mobile marketing in a very strategic and accessible way. So it was, again, very powerful thought leadership and educational medium. And to Dana's point about measurement, since this was in an interactive platform, we were able to track, how many people were listening to those podcasts within the interactive experience, which was extremely valuable for us, to see the overall impact and engagement. But, Cox Media also leveraged it through a bunch of other different channels as well. The podcast had their own dedicated landing pages, for their own standalone outreach, and they also created derivative blog posts focused on some of the topics and trends highlighted in each of the sessions. So again, a really powerful way to, promote and integrate podcasts into the overall educational experience. And, by including them into different marketing efforts and channels, they were able to get the most value out of their podcast investments. So, we're doing a lot more projects now in this medium and a lot of different tests and approaches. But I think this is a really powerful example to share with everyone today. But I'm going to pass it off to Dana because she has a lot of other great insights about what we're working on now with some of our clients.
Yeah, I think you guys, it's so interesting that podcast is becoming so popular. I don't think there's a client Alicia and I sit in front of right now that doesn't say, oh, where are you guys at with podcasts? We're considering and trying them out. So it's definitely this thing right now, right, that everybody is interested in experimenting with. I would say that, there's a couple of trends and nuances that come with podcasts, but also it opens the door for some solutions to maybe video, for example, that can get really expensive when we're creating, right? Or webcasts, which seem to take, feel more static, or I need that person, to schedule time. Podcasts are a simple way to give us audio and bring life to something without needing that video component. And I think it's interesting because video is definitely hot, and about a year ago, everyone wanted video, and then we started to see this slight turn towards podcasts. And the reason being is that I can produce a podcast almost instantaneous, right? And I don't want to say there's no editing involved with it, but what happens is I can interview somebody in a podcast. I don't have to be face-to-face with them. There's software that we use internally that allows us to get really good quality audio from all angles, and then we edit it together, and we have this great piece. And this can be created in a matter of weeks, where video, if I have to send someone on site and get them on camera, or I'm doing motion graphic or whatever it is, we're talking 8, 10, 12 weeks to do good video. So podcasts have kind of solved some of that issue. The influencer angle here is really interesting. So I have a large client that we work with who is trying podcasts across 3 different personas, and they are doing them with influencers. And they have dedicated them, each group, to doing a series and giving it a name and committing to a consistent cadence of podcasts with different marketing and different influencers in their each of their space that equates to their personas. The interesting thing that they're finding is that they're getting great results through LinkedIn, through paid and organic social and LinkedIn with them, and they are seeing the followers come back and look at them. And so I think that the interesting thing with podcasts is there becomes a loyalty to them. I mean, that's what all these podcasts that we listen to serialize. If you find somebody that you like, we go back to them for that consistency, and we want to hear it. And so we look for them for whatever time of the day they're going to be released or whatever that is. So if you can get that going, you can get a really loyal followers to your podcast. I think the key approach here with podcasts, and what we've found with this client especially, this is the one area where we really got to stay clear of products, guys. This can't be a sales pitch. So think about why you would go listen to podcasts. If I turn on a podcast, I'm looking for some insight into an area of interest for me, something that I've got an aha moment in a really short amount of time that I can go, oh yeah, and I'm hearing it from the mouth of that influencer, somebody I respect and I look up to, and I go, yeah, that makes total sense. Why haven't I thought of it? So when we start throwing sales speak in here, we start crossing the line, and this piece, and it kind of defeats the purpose of a podcast. So just keep that best practice in mind if you're if you're testing out podcasts. And then I know that we're running a little short on time, but I want to get to videos here quick because they are this other side of this audio storytelling. So videos are definitely still one of the hottest assets that we're seeing. The challenge with videos for all of us in the B2B world here is that we have a terrible tendency to want to put a lot of words and a lot of things in a video. And best practice right now is saying the longest your video should be is 45 seconds. So I think keep that in mind when you're looking at videos. This one that we've got up on screen for NASDAQ is a great video. And it's kind of like, when do I decide when to use a podcast? When do I decide when to use a video? This actually does focus on a product. And it makes total sense to focus on a product here because this is a really complex product and a really complex situation in their space. So for here to do just a static asset where we're trying to explain it didn't seem like it was quite enough. Definitely couldn't have been done just in a podcast because you don't have the visual to go behind it. It was the perfect combination for a video where I could pair somebody describing it and show them visually what I meant. And so, I think the key with any format when we're talking about all these is what is the best format to deliver the message in an effective way. And so, in this case, we spent time thinking about this is a complex idea we need to portray. What's going to be the best asset to do it? And video came out as the top asset. So we didn't say, hey, I want to create a video today. What should I make the video on? And I think that's important with all of the assets Alicia and I and Steve are talking to you about today. Let the content, the messaging drive your selection of the format type. So like I said, this is also really cool as part of a much larger interactive experience with a calculator, and it's an interactive hub with lots of other things. So video embeds great in all of these assets Alicia and I have been talking about today. Even if they're static, we can embed video these days. So, video, keep it short, keep it sweet, keep it to the point, and make sure that it's serving a purpose.
Yeah, I absolutely love the point you make, Dana. That combination of sight and sound when it's needed, really video floats to the top of the action. But I'm excited to actually do more podcasts myself. So thank you for walking us through those. So a couple formats, and Alicia and Dana both mentioned modular and derivative content formats, and that being a key to success in driving efficiency and scale of creating content. And you also saw analysts and research reports specifically on that list of most consumed content. That shouldn't come as a surprise. We know that third-party insight adds that credibility, similar to influencers. But we know that it can be expensive and it can be, time-consuming. So while research is great, I know Dana and Alicia have some good examples of how they've used research reports, again, to fuel modular and derivative content, but then have also found some creative ways to execute without breaking the bank. So I will pass it to Dana to talk about some interactive and set examples.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. So research is really exciting, I think, for organizations. And I think if you're not considering research, you should look at it. And don't think of it as this huge analyst research study. There's definitely a time and place for those, and those are cool. But they get pricey, and, sometimes they're shared with other vendors. It all depends on the engagement level. I think what you guys need to do when you look at research is go, what is an area that I can't find any data in, and it's an opportunity for me to become an expert in? And then once you've got that, generating the results in there, I think everybody goes, I need thousands of responses and all that. That's not the case. We know that we can get an accurate data level set from anywhere from 100 to 200 results to start. Now, granted, we want more, and we can work towards that, and Alicia is going to talk about an example in a minute where they've grown a research study to allow that. But the idea behind it is that make yourself the thought leader, find a topic that you can really position yourself as a thought leader, and then what you're going to get is a whole bunch of data to not only fuel your marketing initiatives and content ideas for the year, but also help to drive some business decisions. So this one that we're looking at here is for Veracode, and they do this year every year. And this is their state of software survey that they do. And what they do, this is a massive study. As you can see here, this is the interactive version of it, or the online version. They do a PDF of it, and they do tons of derivative content. So the point being that I am going to give people lots of different ways to consume this research. On top of it, they continually go back to this data throughout the year and look for other ideas for content when they're looking to help fuel their campaigns. So I think what's interesting about this is these drop downs that Steve is showing you. This is, I think, when it's laid out, close to 40 pages in a PDF. So when you get to online and interactive experiences, you know, we're kind of going against what we tell our best practices are, right? Which is, let's keep it short and sweet. And so what we did was create a drop down so people could dive in to the topic areas that they wanted to. We've added the same click to tweets in there as you see in other interactive assets. There's also, though, a table of contents in this, so I can scroll through, get to the data I want. And so I think that, you know, what's interesting about this is that I've taken research, I've made it interactive, I've made it a PDF, and I've made lots of other assets around this. And when you talk to Jessica at Veracode, I know that this is definitely one of their biggest lead generation tools throughout the year, and why they keep going back to it year after year, because they are the thought leaders here, and people look to them to provide this data. I think what's interesting, Steve, you have the variation of this too, right, for specific for one audience? So this is interesting too, that the data is so robust here, they're able to break it down by persona. So this is the developer view of application security. So what pieces of the survey actually apply to me as this app developer persona? So again, thinking of different ways of making sure that our content meets the audience, even in a research report, right? I've got all this data, so how can I break it down to be really specific to individual audiences? So I know we're getting close to our time, and I really want Alicia to get a chance to talk to you about the Autotask survey. So Alicia, I'm going to pass it off to you to continue this discussion there.
Thanks so much, Dana. I think you already brought up a lot of really great points about surveys already. So I just want to highlight what's really unique and impactful about this particular example. So like Veracode, Autotask has done this survey year over year since I want to say about 2012 or 2013. It's really become a truly landmark editorial piece for their content calendar, and I think that's really the crux of what makes surveys so valuable. They can be a consistent element of your content story every year, and with all this data, year over year, there are some new trends to focus on and new best practices to zero in on. And, essentially that's what we've tried to do with this survey year after year. We try to let the story, be the focus rather than let's try and jam as much content and as much data as possible into, one piece. What's really, what is our audience telling us? What are the key takeaways? What are the pain points? What are the key investments and focus areas for them? And, this survey garners hundreds of responses year over year. So we had a really, hefty response base to go by. And, our survey report was really focused on, what are the critical trends bubbling to the top? And we really try to keep it as concise and visual as possible, using past year's data as a benchmark and ways to identify, how the IT industry or IT service provider industry has evolved since the survey's inception. And, it has become such a landmark piece, and the storyline was so powerful that they actually used it as the foundation for, their keynote presentation, for their user conference. And this is also a powerful landmark piece for derivative content as well. As Dana noted, they do a more in-depth recap webinar, blog series, et cetera. But, when it comes to reusing and repurposing this type of data, there are really no boundaries. You can do infographics, checklists, listicles, essentially all of the formats that we've talked about today. With the right story, you can really tap those formats to get the most value out of that content. So I would say, this example just proves, even though we may feel tempted to get as much information as possible out of our audience, sometimes it's best to just stay focused on, what key buyer trends and pain points you want to focus on. Like Dana said, what's the white space? What are the opportunities for you to stand out with this content? and build your story and narrative from there.
Great.
No, what a testament,
Steve,
Alicia, that they did this so many years.
Sorry,
That's
Steve.
great. Yeah.
Steve, I think we should just go to the takeaways given the time, and
Great.
we'll circle back to case study portfolios, and then hopefully we'll have a couple minutes to get a few questions and maybe at least one.
Absolutely. Great. I want to make sure we have those time for questions. Let me know when you guys can see the top takeaways.
Yeah, they're good, Steve.
All right. Have at it.
So I think here that, just a few things that Alicia and I wanted to make sure, and Steve, that we got through today. So, no matter what format you saw today, they're all incredible. Remember that format should be dictated by your messaging and your buyers, not by just, hey, it's a cool format. So I think we can get swept away in all of the coolness factor of what's available to us these days. And we sometimes forget to do that gut check and go, what's going to resonate with my audience and what's going to tell the story I need to tell the best with this audience. So I would say that's definitely one of the key takeaways. I also think it's all about variety. Experiment with what's working too. We don't always know. Some of these formats are so new, even compared to the content preferences study we saw, it says interactive. Well, interactive means a lot of things this day. So is that an iPaper? Is it an listicle? Is it, is it a video? What is it? Is it a quiz? So I think just be okay with testing something out and knowing that don't do it all. Don't say I'm going to do 100 interactive assets this year. Do one and see how it works. And then if that works, try something else. But also know it may fail with your audience and I may have to pivot to something else. But try them and see what's working, what's resonating with your audience.
And I think with that, Dana, ties to another key that we talked about is repurposing is really your best friend, right? You're talking about how testing is really critical. You don't know if something doesn't work unless you try it. And if you have this content already, in the form of a static ebook or white paper, you've already invested that time in creating that content. So instead, go back to it, find ways to dissect or, reimagine that content for some of these different formats. So I would say if experimenting and testing those different formats is top of mind for you, which it should be, think of ways to repurpose what you have. And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up again, shorter and more visual has become a standard best practice within this industry. Like, my colleagues have said, ebooks, white papers, et cetera, these longer form content assets and static assets aren't necessarily going away. However, it's time to rethink them and think of ways to better present content so it's more visual, easier to digest, and easier to navigate. And Dana, I'll leave it to you to close things.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Alicia. Yeah, and lastly, guys, this isn't something you have to do all yourself, right? So, there are content partners like we do, we're a content provider. We can help create content. There's also a host of new platforms out there that allow you to create interactive content much faster than you were able to in the past. We love Seros, and Uberflip. We've had great experiences with Ion Interactive. So there's lots of cool platforms, and there's even new video tools out there that allow you to create videos yourself. And I don't need to go necessarily to a video production company. So pick what are the areas you have the biggest gaps in the capabilities in your team, and look to outsource those to people who can help you try some of these new innovative formats. And so with that, Claudia, I think we're good to go over to questions if you're ready.
Yeah, it's about that time. Thank you guys for all those great insights. I love those examples. The interactive content is so cool. We got a lot of good questions. I'm not sure if we could get to all of them, but before we do that, let's see. I'm going to get to those, but I want to remind everybody once again to please share your thoughts and feedback before logging off today. You can do so by clicking the survey icon, which you can see circled here on the bottom of your screen. You can also wait until the close of the session, at which time the survey will automatically launch. Okay, I think we have time for one question. Let me scroll through a few. Let's see what we got here. Okay, this is a good one because I really like this topic and this content. So This one's from Nick, who also loves the idea of podcasts as much as I do. All right, guys, what's your single most important best practice when executing podcasts?
So I'll take that, Claudia. I think what we're learning is it's consistency, and not just in how frequently you're doing them, but at the time of day you're even releasing them. So I don't know who is Netflix binging, who's watching Stranger Things, right? I believe that just got released today, and everybody is super excited. Everybody, I'm surprised, is going to go in and watch these things. But podcasts are really similar, right? That you need to pick a day. If it's the third Thursday of the month at 5 p.m., I'm going to go every, month, if I'm doing it once a month, or if I'm doing it once every 2 weeks, that's going to be the time I release my podcast all the time. And I'm going to be really consistent about that, because people they look forward to them slightly different than they do the other content you're delivering. And if you were into Serialize or all of that, people literally would mark their time and go listen to these podcasts. And so we know that consistency and how often you're doing it is going to be really critical to the success of podcasts. If you do it 1 month and then you stop, you're going to have a really hard time getting your listeners back to it. So just keep that in mind with podcasts.
And I'm just going to jump in here, Dana. I know we're running on time, but a few other things that come to mind. I would say you subtly brought this up around, it's no time for sales speak, right? But I would say this also applies to, the types of guests you onboard. If you're taking that format for your podcast series, focus on people who speak to the high-level topics and trends, and of course to your audience. Finding relevant influencers based on that, I think, is really critical. And that could be through social media outreach, a lot of authors and analysts, but it doesn't necessarily need to be analysts, right? I think we tend to think influencers equal analysts all the time, and it's not always the case. I think there are a lot of folks out there that have equal expertise and passion for topics. They may even be in your organization. They may be power users of yours. So really expand your boundaries as far as the types of people you want to onboard to participate in your podcast. And, finally, building the questions. You really want to frame the conversation around their expertise, their passion points. I think sometimes we get into, content messaging frenzy. We want to make sure everything's totally aligned with value prop all the time, or aligned to the brand's narrative or story. But just keep in mind that podcasts are a very conversational and intimate format. You're trying to reach people on a deeper level by talking about things that are important to them and relate to them. So try to expand beyond your horizons there a little bit and be more open to tailoring the conversation to what the guest would be willing to talk about.
Awesome, guys. I think that's all the time we have for questions, but to all of our attendees, we'll be sure to follow up with you if your questions were unanswered, which, of course, I'm sure they were, because we only were able to answer one. Thanks again to Dana, Alicia, and Steve for this awesome discussion.